October 13th, 1993, 11:47 p.m. Tonopah, Nevada. The neon sign of Murphy's truck stop flickered against the desert darkness like a dying heartbeat, casting intermittent red shadows across the cracked asphalt. A cold October wind swept down from the Sierra Nevada mountains, carrying with it the scent of sage and something else, something that felt like foreboding to those who knew how to read the desert's moods. Inside the diner, beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting that made everyone look like corpses, Garrett McManus sat alone in a corner booth, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. At 42, Garrett carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had driven over 2 million miles without a single accident, who knew every truck stop from Bangor to San Diego, every shortcut through the Rockies, every speed trap along I. His steel-gray eyes, framed by premature crow's feet, earned from squinting into 1,000 sunrises, held a weariness that went deeper than the 20-hour drives he regularly pulled. The CB radio clipped to his belt crackled with the late-night chatter of other drivers. Complaints about DOT inspections, warnings about black ice forming near Reno, the usual crude jokes that helped pass the lonely hours. But Garrett wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on the manila envelope sitting on the table before him, its contents representing the most lucrative and strangest haul of his 15-year career. The envelope had arrived at his home in Sparks 3 days earlier, delivered by a man in an unremarkable gray sedan who had refused to give his name. Inside were shipping documents unlike any Garrett had ever seen. No company letterhead, no product description, just a pickup location in Henderson and delivery coordinates that, when he'd looked them up, pointed to a spot in the middle of nowhere, roughly 200 miles northeast of Las Vegas in the heart of the Nevada test site. The payment authorization made his hands shake when he first read it. $50,000 for a single run. More money than he typically made in 6 months, enough to finally pay off the second mortgage on his house, to cover his daughter Emma's college tuition without her having to work 2 jobs, to maybe even take his wife Linda on that anniversary trip to Ireland she'd been dreaming about for 20 years. But it was the conditions that made his stomach churn. No questions asked, no manifest inspection, no stops except for fuel. Radio silence during transport. Delivery must be completed between midnight and 3 a.m. on October 14th. Failure to comply will result in immediate contract termination and legal action. Legal action. The phrase had a weight to it that felt like a threat. Garrett drained the bitter coffee and checked his watch. 11:52 p.m. Time to move. He left a $5 tip for Marge, the night shift waitress who had been serving truckers at Murphy's since Carter was president, and walked out into the desert chill. His rig sat in the parking lot like a sleeping giant, a 1991 Peterbilt 37.9 in midnight blue, its chrome bumper and stacks polished to mirror brightness despite the harsh Nevada sun that had beaten down on it for thousands of miles. The trailer behind it was unremarkable, a standard 53-foot dry van with Nevada commercial plates and no company markings. It could have been carrying anything: furniture, electronics, canned goods, but whatever was inside made no sound when he'd walked around it, gave no hint of its contents despite his trained ear that could usually identify cargo by the way it shifted during turns. The pickup in Henderson had been stranger still. A warehouse in an industrial district where the streetlights seemed deliberately dimmed, where security cameras tracked his every movement, where the loading crew wore no uniforms and spoke in whispers. They had worked with military precision, using a forklift to load 6 identical wooden crates, each about the size of a coffin, each bearing stenciled numbers instead of shipping labels. Printerfan of U.S. government, unauthorized access prohibited. That's all the marking said. No department, no agency, no contact information. Just a warning that carried the full weight of federal law. Garrett performed his pre-trip inspection by muscle memory, his flashlight beam dancing across brake lines and air hoses, while his mind wandered to darker possibilities. The Nevada test site had been the epicenter of atomic weapons testing for decades. Underground detonations that shook windows in Las Vegas, above-ground blasts that painted the sky with unnatural colors and left shadows burned into the desert floor. Though the moratorium on testing had been in place since 1992, the site remained one of the most heavily guarded pieces of real estate in the country. What could they possibly be moving out there in the dead of night? And why pay an independent trucker $50,000 to haul it? The radio crackled as he climbed into the cab. "Westbound Pete, you copy?" Garrett keyed the mic. "This is the Blue Hammer. Go ahead. You are running kind of late for this time of night, brother. Where you headed?" The question hung in the air like smoke. According to his instructions, he was supposed to maintain radio silence. But old habits died hard, and the trucking community was built on communication, on watching out for each other across the vast emptiness of the American road system. "Just a short run tonight," Garrett replied carefully. "Catch you on the flip." He switched off the CB and put the truck in gear. The Cummins diesel rumbled to life beneath him, a sound as familiar as his own heartbeat, and he pulled out onto Highway 6, leaving the lights of Tonopah behind. The desert night swallowed him whole. October 14th, 1993, 12:23 a.m. Highway 6. Approaching Warm Springs. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, illuminating nothing but endless asphalt and the occasional reflective eyes of jackrabbits, frozen in the glare. Garrett kept his speed steady at 65, though every instinct screamed at him to push harder, to get this run over with and collect his money. But the weight behind him felt different somehow. Not just physical weight, but something that seemed to press down on the cab itself, making the air thick and hard to breathe. He thought about Linda, probably asleep in their bed in Sparks, unaware that her husband was hauling God knows what through the Nevada wasteland. He thought about Emma, 19 years old and brilliant, studying pre-med at UNLV with dreams of becoming a pediatric surgeon. This one run would secure her future, would ensure she graduated debt-free and could focus on her studies instead of working midnight shifts at the campus library. But as the miles rolled by, doubt crept in like desert cold. The radio silence bothered him most. In 15 years of over-the-road driving, Garrett had never gone more than an hour without hearing another trucker's voice. The CB was more than communication. It was companionship, a lifeline that connected every driver to a vast network of brothers and sisters who understood the isolation, the responsibility, the danger of moving freight across America's highways. Now, with the radio dark and his phone showing no signal, he felt more alone than he ever had in his life. At 12:34 a.m., he passed the exit for Warm Springs, a town so small it barely qualified as a dot on the map. A single streetlight illuminated a gas station that had been closed since the interstate bypassed it in the 70s. But as his headlights swept across the intersection, Garrett caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. A black Suburban with government plates, parked in the shadows behind the abandoned station. He kept his eyes on the road, maintained his speed, fought the urge to check his mirrors, but he could feel eyes watching him, could sense radio chatter he wasn't hearing, could imagine satellite cameras tracking his progress across the empty desert. Whatever he was carrying, someone wanted to make damn sure it reached its destination. The delivery coordinates led him off Highway 6 onto a dirt road marked only by a weathered sign. Restricted area, authorized personnel only. The road surface was surprisingly well maintained for something that supposedly led to nowhere. And after 5 miles of steady climbing through rocky hills, Garrett saw lights ahead. Not the warm yellow glow of a truck stop or the harsh white of a warehouse, but something clinical and blue-white, like an operating theater or a laboratory. As he crested a small rise, the full scope of the facility came into view, and Garrett understood with crystalline clarity that he had been lied to. This wasn't a delivery. This was a pickup. The complex spread across a flat valley floor like a small city, all low concrete buildings and razor wire, with floodlights mounted on towers that swept the perimeter in lazy arcs. Guard towers stood at each corner, their occupants invisible behind tinted glass. At the center of it all, a massive hangar-like structure rose from the desert floor, its metal skin gleaming under the artificial suns. Garrett's delivery window was midnight to 3 a.m. It was now 12. A checkpoint appeared ahead, complete with armed guards and a gate that could stop a tank. Garrett downshifted and brought the rig to a stop, his hands surprisingly steady as he reached for his paperwork. A guard approached the driver's side, his face hidden behind night vision goggles that made him look more insect than human. Purpose of visit? The voice was crisp, professional, completely devoid of curiosity. Delivery, Garrett replied, handing over the shipping documents. Got 6 crates for Building 7. The guard examined the papers with a UV light, checking for security features Garrett hadn't known existed. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he handed them back. Proceed to the loading dock. Authorized personnel will unload your cargo. Do not exit your vehicle. Do not take photographs. Do not communicate with facility personnel beyond what is necessary to complete the delivery. The gate rose with hydraulic precision, and Garrett drove into a world that officially didn't exist. When 15 a.m., Facility 7. The loading dock was a study in efficiency and paranoia. Security cameras tracked his every movement, their red recording lights blinking like malevolent eyes. Motion sensors swept the area with invisible beams. Even the air felt different here. Sterile, recycled, carrying the faint scent of ozone and something else he couldn't identify. A team of technicians in white hazmat suits emerged from a side building, moving with the practiced coordination of a NASCAR pit crew. They guided him into position with hand signals, their faces hidden behind full-face respirators that made them look like alien beings. No one spoke. The only sounds were the hiss of hydraulics, the clank of metal on metal, and the distant hum of machinery that never slept. As they began unloading the crates, Garrett caught a glimpse of markings he hadn't seen before. Stenciled on each wooden box in small, precise letters, Project Blackbird, Authorized Level Q clearance only. Level Q. Even Garrett, with no military background, knew that designation. Nuclear material. The highest classification in the government alphabet soup of secrets. His throat went dry as the implications hit him. He hadn't been hired to deliver mysterious cargo to a secret facility. He had been hired to transport nuclear material away from it. The crates going into his trailer now were different. Smaller, heavier, with warning labels that made his skin crawl. Radioactive material, special nuclear material, caution. This was no ordinary delivery run. This was nuclear smuggling, and he was the unwitting mule. The loading process took exactly 14 minutes. As the last crate was secured and the trailer doors sealed with security tape that would reveal any tampering, one of the technicians approached his window. Through the respirator mask, Garrett could see eyes the color of winter sky. Delivery window is now 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., the technician said, his voice muffled but understandable. Coordinates have changed. Check your route instructions. A new envelope was pressed into Garrett's hand, this one heavier than the first, sealed with wax that bore an eagle emblem he didn't recognize. His fingers trembled as he accepted it, feeling the weight of whatever fresh nightmare lay inside. Where am I taking this? Garrett asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The technicians stepped back without answering. The loading bay doors began to close, cutting off the sterile light and plunging the world back into desert darkness. Garrett sat alone in his cab, the envelope burning like a coal in his lap, while around him the facility hummed with alien energy. He tore open the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside were new delivery instructions, a route map marked with waypoints he didn't recognize, and a single photograph that stopped his heart. The photo showed a man in a trucker's cap, standing beside a Peterbilt 37-9. The same model, the same midnight blue paint job, even the same chrome accessories. But the license plate was different, and the man's face was obscured by shadows. Clipped to the photo was a yellow sticky note with a message in neat block letters. Johnny Torres delivered on schedule October 9. Beneath it, in red ink that looked disturbingly like dried blood, no questions asked. Garrett's hands shook as he started the engine. The new coordinates pointed northwest, toward the Yucca mountain range, and areas of Nevada that didn't appear on any civilian map. The delivery window gave him less than 3 hours to cover unknown terrain in the dead of night, carrying cargo that could irradiate half the state if something went wrong. But it was the photograph that haunted him as he drove away from the facility, its lights fading in his mirrors like a fever dream. Johnny Torres. Garrett knew that name. Every trucker who worked the Southwest knew that name. Johnny Torres had disappeared in October 1991, vanished along with his rig somewhere between Las Vegas and Reno. The FBI had investigated, the Nevada Highway Patrol had searched, his family had offered rewards. But no trace was ever found. No wreckage, no body, no answers. Just another trucker who had driven into the desert night and never came home. As Garrett navigated the dark roads toward his unknown destination, the weight in his trailer seemed to grow heavier with each mile. The cargo shifted and settled with sounds like whispers, like secrets trying to claw their way out of their wooden coffins. The Geiger counter mounted near the facility's exit had clicked frantically as he passed, its needle dancing in the red zone before falling silent as the distance increased. He thought about turning around, of dumping the trailer and running. But the photographs in the envelope suggested that others had tried that approach, and their fate was written in the silence that followed their disappearance. At 2:17 a.m., Garrett McManus checked his mirrors one last time and saw headlights following at a discreet distance. Government plates, he was certain, though he couldn't make out the details in the darkness. They had been there since he left the facility, matching his speed, maintaining perfect spacing, like shepherds guiding their flock, or hunters stalking their prey. The CB radio crackled to life for the first time in hours, startling him so badly he nearly swerved off the road. "Blue Hammer, this is Night Watch. You copy?" The voice was calm, professional, completely unfamiliar. Garrett reached for the mic with a hand that felt disconnected from his body. "This is Blue Hammer. Go ahead, Night Watch. You are approaching Checkpoint Alpha in 7 miles. Reduce speed to 55 and maintain radio contact. Do you understand these instructions? Checkpoint Alpha." It wasn't on any map, wasn't mentioned in the delivery instructions, but the headlights behind him had closed the distance slightly, and Garrett could see more lights ahead, not the warm glow of civilization, but the harsh white spots of a roadblock. "Blue Hammer copies," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Reducing speed to 55. Negative, Blue Hammer. Reduce speed to 0. Pull over and await instructions." The words hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a delivery anymore. This was a trap. Garrett's mind raced through possibilities as he began to slow the rig. He could run. The Peterbilt had enough power to outrun most pursuit vehicles, at least until they brought in helicopters. He could dump the trailer and disappear into the desert on foot. He could call the FBI, the Nevada Highway Patrol, CNN, anyone who might listen to a trucker's crazy story about government conspiracies and missing nuclear material. But the photograph of Johnny Torres burned in his memory, along with the implication that asking questions led to permanent silence. The roadblock materialized out of the darkness like something from a nightmare. Military vehicles, men in desert camouflage carrying automatic weapons, and at the center of it all, a figure in a civilian suit who stood with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Garrett brought the rig to a stop 50 yards from the checkpoint, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The radio crackled again. "Exit your vehicle, Blue Hammer. Keep your hands visible and approach the command post." This was it, the moment of truth. Garrett thought about Linda, asleep in their bed in Sparks. He thought about Emma, studying for her organic chemistry exam, unaware that her father had become an unwitting pawn in a game whose rules he didn't understand. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. On the seat beside him lay the manila envelope with his original delivery instructions. Inside was a business card he hadn't noticed before. Tucked behind the payment authorization, a card with no name, no title, just a phone number, and a single word embossed in silver letters: redemption. Garrett pocketed the card and stepped out into the Nevada night. The desert wind cut through his jacket like a blade, carrying the scent of sage and ozone. And something else, something that smelled like fear. The man in the suit approached with measured steps, his face a mask of professional neutrality. In the harsh glare of the spotlights, Garrett could see he was older than expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes like chips of Arctic ice. "Mr. McManus," the man said, extending his hand. "My name is Director Hamilton. We need to talk." October 14th, 1993, 2:31 a.m. Classified location: Nevada desert. Director Hamilton's handshake was firm, calculated, the grip of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of controlled intimidation. In the harsh glare of the military spotlights, his face revealed nothing. No warmth, no malice, just the professional neutrality of someone accustomed to making problems disappear. "You are probably wondering why we have intercepted your delivery," Hamilton said, his voice carrying the faint trace of a Boston accent refined by years in Washington corridors. "The answer is simple, Mr. McManus. You are not just a truck driver tonight. You are a national security asset." Garrett's mouth felt full of sand. Around them, soldiers maintained their positions with military precision, weapons lowered but ready, their faces hidden behind night vision equipment that made them look like mechanical insects. The desert wind howled through the checkpoint, stirring dust devils that danced in the artificial light like ghosts. "I just want to complete my delivery and go home to my family," Garrett said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I don't know what kind of asset you think I am, but—" Johnny Torres thought the same thing. Hamilton interrupted, and the name hit Garrett like a physical blow. Right up until the moment he realized he was carrying enough enriched uranium to level downtown Las Vegas. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Garrett felt his knees go weak, felt the weight of the cargo behind him pressing down like a mountain. "That's impossible. The facility—" They loaded standard transport containers. The paperwork showed what we wanted it to show." Hamilton pulled a tablet from his jacket, its screen illuminating his face with blue light. "Project Blackbird has been operational since we have been selectively retiring nuclear material from the Nevada test site, moving it to secure storage facilities throughout the Southwest. The problem is, Mr. McManus, some of that material has been going to places it was never supposed to reach." Hamilton swiped across the tablet screen, revealing surveillance photos that made Garrett's blood freeze. Images of his own truck at the facility, time-stamped just hours earlier. Photos of the loading process, the crates being secured, the technicians in hazmat suits. But there were other images too. Older photos showing different trucks, different drivers, all carrying identical cargo. Johnny Torres was transporting Material Package 7 on October 15, 1991. Destination: a secure storage facility in Arizona. But Johnny never reached Arizona. Mr. McManus. He was intercepted by parties unknown somewhere near Beatty, Nevada. The uranium disappeared along with him. Garrett stared at the tablet screen, at photographs that told a story of systematic deception. "You are saying someone hijacked a nuclear shipment?" "I'm saying someone has been hijacking nuclear shipments for over 2 years. 6 drivers, 6 loads of weapons-grade material, all vanished without a trace. The FBI has been investigating, but every trail leads to dead ends. Literally." Hamilton's finger traced across the screen, revealing driver license photos, men who looked disturbingly similar to Garrett himself. All experienced truckers, all reliable family men, all in need of money for one reason or another. The implications struck Garrett like lightning. "You are using us as bait." We are using you as an early warning system." Hamilton pocketed the tablet and stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Someone inside the government has been selling information about these shipments. They know the routes, the timing, the security protocols. We have been feeding them false information for months, trying to identify the leak. Tonight, you are carrying the real thing, Mr. McManus, and whoever has been stealing our nuclear material is going to make a move." Around them, the soldiers began to stir. Radio chatter crackled through the night air, voices speaking in military codes that Garrett didn't understand. Something was happening, something that had the professionals worried. "Contact bearing 270, approximately 15 miles out," a voice reported through Hamilton's radio. "Multiple vehicles, moving fast." Hamilton's expression didn't change, but Garrett caught the slight tensing around his eyes. "Right on schedule," he murmured. "Mr. McManus, in approximately 12 minutes you are going to continue your delivery route. You will proceed northeast toward Yucca Mountain as originally planned, but you won't be alone." "I don't understand." "The people who killed Johnny Torres and the others are coming for you tonight. They have inside information about your cargo, your route, your timing. What they don't know is that we have been expecting them." Hamilton gestured toward the darkness beyond the checkpoint, where Garrett could now see additional vehicles moving into position. "This is the end game, Mr. McManus. Tonight we find out who's been bleeding our nuclear program dry." The radio crackled again. "Director, we have positive identification on the lead vehicle. Black suburban Nevada government plates. Same configuration as the Beatty Intercept." Garrett felt ice water flow through his veins. "The suburban that's been following me since I left the facility?" Hamilton's head snapped toward him. "What suburban?" "Black suburban with government plates. It's been tailing me for the last hour, staying back but maintaining visual contact." Garrett pointed toward his truck. "I thought it was part of your operation." For the first time since the conversation began, Hamilton looked genuinely concerned. He spoke rapidly into his radio, coordinating with teams Garrett couldn't see. The response was swift and chilling. "Negative on friendly assets in that sector. Director, all our units are accounted for." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The suburban hadn't been protecting Garrett's cargo. It had been hunting it, and now, with military precision, the real predators were closing in. "Change of plans," Hamilton said, his professional calm cracking slightly. "You are not bait anymore, Mr. McManus. You are the target, and they are already here." 8:47 a.m., Highway 95, approaching Mercury. The convoy that surrounded Garrett's truck moved with lethal efficiency through the Nevada desert. Military vehicles flanked him on all sides. Armored Humvees with mounted weapons, unmarked SUVs carrying federal agents, and somewhere in the darkness above, the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors cutting through the wind. But the protection felt illusory. Every few minutes, Hamilton's voice crackled through the radio they had given him, updating him on the approaching threat. The hostiles were maintaining distance, but matching speed. A pack of wolves waiting for the right moment to strike. "Blue Hammer, this is Overwatch." Hamilton's voice came through the encrypted channel. "Hostile count is now 8 vehicles, approaching from multiple vectors. ETA to intercept point is 6 minutes. Garrett's hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. The weight behind him had taken on a malevolent presence, as if the nuclear material itself was aware of the danger closing in. "Where exactly is this intercept point?" "Mile marker 47, just past the Mercury turnoff. It's a natural choke point where the highway narrows between 2 ridgelines, classic ambush terrain." "And what happens when we get there?" Static filled the radio for several seconds before Hamilton responded. "You keep driving, Mr. McManus. Whatever happens, you do not stop. The cargo you are carrying cannot fall into the wrong hands." The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of black ink, its surface reflecting his headlights in patterns that seemed to shift and writhe. Garrett thought about the uranium behind him. Weapons-grade material that could be fashioned into a dirty bomb capable of contaminating entire city blocks. He thought about Johnny Torres and the other drivers who had vanished, and wondered if their last thoughts had been of their families, left behind to wonder what had happened in the desert darkness. Mile marker 45 flashed past. Then, Overwatch, this is Blue Hammer. I'm seeing lights ahead, lots of them. Confirmed, Blue Hammer. You are approaching the kill zone. Maintain speed and stay in the center of the formation. Do not deviate from the highway under any circumstances. The lights resolved into a scene from a war movie. Vehicles blocked both sides of the highway, their headlights creating a blazing corridor of white light. Muzzle flashes erupted from hidden positions as the federal convoy engaged with the ambush party. Tracer rounds streaked across the darkness like deadly fireworks, and the sound of automatic weapons fire echoed off the surrounding hills. Jesus Christ, Garrett whispered into the radio. Blue Hammer, you are cleared hot through the kill zone. I repeat, do not stop, punch through, and maintain course. Garrett downshifted and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Peterbilt's engine roared like a caged beast as the truck plowed into the battle zone. Bullets sparked off his hood and windshield, spiderwebbing the safety glass, but not penetrating. The armored protection Hamilton's team had hastily installed was holding, but for how long? A figure in black tactical gear stepped into the highway directly ahead, raising what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Garrett had a split second to register the man's face, scarred professional, the cold eyes of a killer, before one of the flanking Humvees opened fire, cutting the attacker down in a hail of gunfire. Then they were through, racing past burning vehicles and scattered bodies, leaving the firefight behind in a storm of diesel smoke and adrenaline. The radio crackled with damage reports and casualty counts, but Garrett was no longer listening. His attention was fixed on the road ahead, and the growing certainty that this was far from over. Blue Hammer, this is Overwatch. Good work. You are clear of immediate danger. But we have a problem. What kind of problem? Preliminary interrogation of captured hostiles indicates this was a distraction. The real theft attempt is happening at your original pickup point. Garrett's blood turned to ice. The Facility 7 is under attack by a coordinated assault team. Unknown number of casualties. And Mr. McManus, they are asking specifically about Project Blackbird materials that were supposed to be in your trailer. The pieces of a larger conspiracy began to fall into place. The attack on his convoy hadn't been about stealing his cargo. It had been about determining what cargo he was actually carrying. Someone wanted to know if the nuclear material in his trailer was the real thing, or another government decoy. Director Hamilton, Garrett said slowly, what exactly am I carrying back there? Static filled the radio for nearly 30 seconds before Hamilton responded, and when he did, his voice carried a weight that chilled Garrett to the bone. The truth, Mr. McManus. You are carrying the truth about what really happened to Johnny Torres and the others. And there are people who will kill to keep that truth buried. October 14th, 1993, 3:23 a.m. Classified location, 40 miles northeast of Las Vegas. The final delivery coordinates led Garrett to a facility that didn't exist on any map, nestled in a valley so remote it felt like the surface of an alien planet. Unlike the sterile military precision of Facility 7, this place had the improvised, desperate feel of a last-ditch operation. Portable buildings, hastily erected satellite dishes, and security perimeters that looked more like a survivalist compound than a government installation. Hamilton met him at the gate, but the man who emerged from the armored SUV looked like he had aged years in the past hour. His silver hair was disheveled, his suit jacket torn, and there was a darkness in his eyes that spoke of terrible revelations. Mr. McManus, he said as Garrett climbed down from the cab, before we unload your cargo, there's something you need to see. Hamilton led him into a prefabricated building that served as a command center. Banks of monitors displayed satellite feeds, radio intercepts and surveillance footage from locations across Nevada. But it was the evidence table in the center of the room that drew Garrett's attention. Personal effects laid out like artifacts from an archaeological dig. Driver's licenses, wedding rings, family photographs, and CB radios. 6 sets of belongings from 6 missing truckers, including a familiar leather wallet that made Garrett's knees go weak. "Johnny Torres," Hamilton said, following his gaze. "These items were recovered from a mass grave approximately 50 miles from here. All 6 drivers were executed with small-caliber rounds to the head. Professional work." Garrett picked up one of the photographs, a family portrait showing Johnny Torres with his wife and 2 young children. The same kind of picture that sat on Garrett's own dashboard, a talisman against the loneliness of the road. Who killed them? That's what we have been trying to determine for 2 years. Tonight we finally got our answer. Hamilton activated one of the monitors, displaying surveillance footage from Facility 7. The timestamp showed events from earlier that evening, during the coordinated attack. The video revealed a truth more horrifying than Garrett could have imagined. The assault team moved with military precision, but their faces were visible in the facility's security cameras. Government agents, federal employees, people who should have been protecting the nuclear material, not stealing it. The leak wasn't someone selling information, Hamilton said quietly. The leak was the entire operation. Project Blackbird was compromised from the beginning. Rogue elements within the Department of Energy have been systematically stealing weapons-grade uranium and selling it to unknown buyers. Foreign governments, terrorist organizations, private collectors we don't know yet. And the drivers? Witnesses. Loose ends. The original plan was probably to let you complete the delivery and then eliminate you quietly. Make it look like another highway accident. But our intervention forced them to accelerate their timeline. Garrett stared at the evidence table, at the personal effects of men who had died simply for doing their jobs. "What's really in my trailer, Director Hamilton?" Hamilton's expression was grim. "Documentation, financial records, communication intercepts, personnel files, everything we have gathered over 2 years of investigation. You weren't transporting nuclear material tonight, Mr. McManus. You were transporting evidence of the biggest breach of nuclear security in American history." The revelation hit Garrett like a physical blow. He had been carrying something far more dangerous than uranium. The truth about a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. People had died to protect that truth, and more would die before it was over. "The crates at the facility," Garrett said slowly. "The ones they loaded into my trailer, were those empty. We have been moving the real nuclear material through different channels for months, trying to identify the security breach. Tonight was a trap, Mr. McManus, and you were the bait." 6 years later, September 1999, FBI Field Office, Las Vegas, Nevada. Special Agent Rebecca Morrison stared at the case file that had consumed the last 3 years of her career, wondering if the truth was worth the lives it had cost to uncover. The Johnny Torres investigation had officially been closed in 1995, filed away as another unsolved missing persons case in a state where people disappeared into the desert with disturbing regularity. But Morrison knew better. The evidence was all there, hidden in classified files and buried beneath layers of government bureaucracy. 6 truckers dead, millions of dollars in weapons-grade uranium missing, and a conspiracy that reached into the Department of Energy, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and possibly the FBI itself. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. A phone call to a number found in Garrett McManus's effects after his death in a single-car accident outside of Sparks in November. The number led to a dead drop containing documents that read like science fiction. Financial records showing uranium sales to buyers in Pakistan and North Korea. Communication intercepts revealing the existence of a nuclear black market operating out of Nevada. And personnel files identifying government employees who had been systematically eliminated when they got too close to the truth. Morrison picked up the photograph that had started it all. Johnny Torres with his family recovered from the mass grave that had finally been located in 1997. 6 men who had died for hauling the wrong cargo on the wrong night, killed by people who had sworn to protect American interests. The phone on her desk rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed a familiar number. Director Hamilton, who had been cooperating with the FBI investigation since his own retirement from whatever agency had employed him during the Blackbird years. Agent Morrison. Hamilton's voice was tired, the sound of a man who had seen too much and lived too long with terrible secrets. I have news about the Pakistani connection. Morrison grabbed a pen. What kind of news? The kind that's going to require you to reopen the Torres case officially. The uranium that disappeared in 1993. It just showed up in a dirty bomb investigation in Karachi. The isotopic signature matches material from the Nevada test site. The words hit Morrison like a sledgehammer. After 6 years of dead ends and buried evidence, they finally had proof that the stolen nuclear material had been weaponized by foreign actors. The implications were staggering, not just for national security, but for the families of the drivers who had died protecting secrets they didn't even know they carried. Director Hamilton, Morrison said slowly, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. No more classified designations, no more national security restrictions. The truth, all of it. Static filled the line for several seconds before Hamilton responded. Agent Morrison, the truth about Project Blackbird is going to destroy careers, topple governments, and start a war with Pakistan. Are you prepared for that? Morrison looked at the photograph of Johnny Torres at the face of a man who had simply wanted to provide for his family and had died for stumbling into a conspiracy beyond his comprehension. She thought about Garrett McManus and the other drivers, about the families who still didn't know what had happened to their loved ones in the Nevada desert. Director, she said, I have been prepared for 6 years. October 2003, 10 years after undisclosed location. The man who had once called himself Director Hamilton sat in a wheelchair on the porch of a safe house that officially didn't exist, watching the Nevada sunrise paint the desert mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The cancer had taken most of his strength, but his mind remained sharp, focused on the final chapters of a story that had cost too many lives to tell. The FBI investigation had been thorough, but ultimately incomplete. 3 rogue Department of Energy officials had been arrested and quietly prosecuted in closed federal courts. Several Pakistani intelligence operatives had been expelled from the country. The families of the 6 murdered truckers had received substantial government settlements in exchange for their silence about the circumstances of their loved ones' deaths. But the truth about Project Blackbird remained buried beneath layers of classification that would probably outlive everyone who remembered why the secrets needed to be kept. Hamilton picked up the secure satellite phone beside his chair and dialed a number he had memorized, but never called. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Morrison. Agent Morrison, this is the director. I have something for you. Jesus, Hamilton. I thought you were dead. Not yet, but soon enough. That's why I'm calling. The complete Blackbird files. The real ones, not the sanitized versions your investigation uncovered, are in a safety deposit box in Carson City. Box 24/7 at First National. The key is taped under the mailbox at 1224th and Desert View Drive in Sparks. Morrison's voice was sharp with sudden attention. What's in the file? Names. All of them. The government officials who authorized the theft, the foreign buyers who purchased weapons-grade uranium, the contractors who handled the transportation and elimination of witnesses. Everything you need to finish what you started. Why now? Why not 6 years ago when we could have prosecuted? Hamilton watched the sun climb higher, feeling the weight of years and decisions and consequences that could never be undone. Because 10 years ago tonight, a truck driver named Garrett McManus made a choice to trust his government, and that trust got him killed, along with 5 other good men who were just trying to provide for their families. Hamilton, if I open this box, if I pursue this investigation, people are going to die. Important people. The political ramifications alone. People are already dying, Agent Morrison. Every dirty bomb that detonates with Nevada uranium, every nuclear weapon that gets built with American materials, every act of nuclear terrorism that traces back to Project Blackbird, those deaths are on our hands. The only question is whether we are going to let the truth die with us. The line was quiet for several seconds before Morrison responded. The key is under the mailbox at 12. Under the mailbox. And Agent Morrison, when you open those files, when you see the full scope of what we uncovered, remember that every page represents a choice. The choice between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths. Between protecting the powerful and serving justice. Hamilton ended the call and set the phone aside. In the distance, a hawk circled high above the desert floor, riding the thermals in lazy spirals that reminded him of surveillance patterns and overwatch operations and all the times he had watched from above while good people died below. The cancer would probably take him before Morrison opened the safety deposit box, before the final truth about Project Blackbird came to light. But Johnny Torres and Garrett McManus and the others would finally get the justice they deserved, even if it came too late to bring them home. In the Nevada desert, where secrets went to die and the truth was buried beneath sand and classification stamps, the morning sun climbed toward its zenith, illuminating a landscape that had witnessed too many dark deeds and held too many dangerous secrets. But secrets, Hamilton knew, were like nuclear material. They had a half-life, and eventually, inevitably, they decayed into something that could no longer be contained. The truth about the vanishing truckers was about to see the light of day. October 15, 2003. Carson City, Nevada, First National Bank. Special Agent Rebecca Morrison's hands trembled as she inserted the key into safety deposit box 24/7, 10 years to the day after Garrett McManus had vanished into the Nevada desert. The bank's sterile fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the lines that 6 years of chasing ghosts had etched around her eyes. The previous night's phone call from Hamilton had shattered whatever peace she had managed to find after the official closure of the Blackbird investigation. 3 rogue officials prosecuted in secret courts, a handful of settlements paid to grieving families, and a conspiracy buried so deep that even she had begun to believe the sanitized version of events. But Hamilton's final revelation had changed everything. The complete files, the real truth, names, dates, financial records, and evidence that would reach into the highest levels of the American government and beyond. The safety deposit box opened with a soft metallic click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet bank vault. Inside, Morrison found a single manila envelope marked with a skull and crossbones drawn in what looked like a child's crayon. Hamilton's gallows humor, even in his final act of revelation. Attached to the envelope was a handwritten note in Hamilton's precise script. Agent Morrison, by the time you read this, I will be dead. The cancer finally won, as we all knew it would. But the truth about Project Blackbird deserves to outlive both of us. What you are about to discover will destroy careers, topple governments, and probably get you killed. But 6 good men died for this truth, and they deserve better than the lies we have been selling their families. Remember, every page represents a choice between justice and expedience. Choose wisely. Director William Hamilton. Morrison's throat constricted as she realized Hamilton had already passed, probably hours after their final phone conversation. She opened the envelope with steady fingers, despite the earthquake of dread building in her chest. The first document stopped her cold. A financial ledger showing uranium transactions worth over $2 billion, with buyers listed as shell companies in Pakistan, Iran, North Korea, and a dozen other nations that weren't supposed to have access to weapons-grade nuclear material. The selling organization was listed simply as Desert Acquisitions LLC, but the authorized signatures belonged to Deputy Director Marcus Thornfield of the Department of Energy and Assistant Secretary of Defense Patricia Vance. Names she recognized. People who were still alive, still in government service, still in positions to authorize the movement of nuclear materials. The second document was worse. A kill list with photographs and personal information for 17 people who had gotten too close to the Blackbird operation. 6 were the truckers she knew about. The others included 2 Nuclear Regulatory Commission inspectors, a Department of Energy accountant, a Nevada state trooper, and several other federal employees who had asked inconvenient questions. All had died in accidents, car crashes, hunting mishaps, sudden heart attacks, and one apparent suicide that had never sat right with Morrison's investigative instincts. But it was the third document that made her sink into the vault's single chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. A memorandum dated October 20th, 1993, addressed to all Blackbird personnel, and signed by someone whose name made her blood turn to ice. From FBI Associate Deputy Director James Crawford to Blackbird Operations Team RE Containment Protocol 7. The McManus situation has been resolved per standard operating procedures. Vehicle recovery was completed at 0347 hours on October 16th. Subject was eliminated during staged accident scenario, and body was processed through standard channels. All evidence of Blackbird involvement has been sanitized. Agent Morrison of Las Vegas Field Office has been flagged as a potential security risk due to her persistent inquiries regarding the Torres disappearance. Recommend immediate reassignment to minimize exposure to Blackbird-related materials. Operational security remains our highest priority. No exception. Morrison stared at the memo until the words blurred together. Crawford was her supervisor, the man who had assigned her to the Torres case, who had supported her investigation, who had praised her thoroughness and dedication, the man who had been feeding her just enough information to keep her busy while ensuring she never discovered the real truth. Crawford had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning, and if he knew she was reading this memo, she would be dead within hours. Morrison pulled out her encrypted satellite phone and dialed a number she had committed to memory years earlier. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Organized Crime Task Force. Agent Rodriguez. Miguel, it's Rebecca Morrison. I need an emergency meeting. Code 7 protocol. A pause. Code 7 meant life-threatening intelligence requiring immediate federal protection. In 6 years of working together, Morrison had never used that designation. Location, the usual place. 1 hour. Rebecca, what the hell is going on? Morrison looked at the documents spread before her, at evidence of a conspiracy that reached into every level of federal law enforcement. Miguel, I just found out that my supervisor has been part of a nuclear smuggling ring for over a decade, and if I'm right, they are going to try to kill me before sunset. October 15, 2003, 11:23 a.m., Lake Tahoe, California. Remote cabin. Agent Miguel Rodriguez had been Morrison's partner during her early years with the Bureau, before his transfer to the Organized Crime Task Force. The cabin belonged to his family, a rustic hideaway nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains, where cell phones couldn't reach, and satellite surveillance would have difficulty penetrating the forest canopy. Morrison spread Hamilton's documents across the cabin's kitchen table while Rodriguez paced the room like a caged wolf, his hand never straying far from his service weapon. The implications of what she had discovered were sinking in, and both agents understood that they were now targets in a game where the rules had been written by their enemies. Jesus Christ, Rebecca, Rodriguez muttered, examining the kill list. 17 people dead. All because they stumbled onto a uranium smuggling operation run by the goddamn federal government. It gets worse. Morrison pulled out the final document from Hamilton's envelope, a thick folder marked Resurrection Protocol, in red letters. Remember how we could never figure out where the stolen uranium went? How the trail always went cold at the Pakistani border? Rodriguez stopped pacing. What did you find? Morrison opened the folder, revealing satellite photographs, intelligence reports and communication intercepts that told a story more horrifying than either agent could have imagined. The stolen uranium hadn't just been sold to foreign governments. It had been used to construct dirty bombs that were already deployed in major American cities. Sleeper cells, Morrison said quietly. Pakistani intelligence operatives working with domestic terrorists. They have been positioning radiological dispersal devices in New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and Chicago for the past 5 years. The uranium signature matches material stolen from the Nevada test site. Rodriguez sank into a chair, his face pale. They are planning to detonate American nuclear material in American cities. Not planning, prepared. According to this intelligence, they are waiting for a trigger event. Probably a military action against Pakistan or Iran to activate the devices simultaneously. Morrison traced her finger across a map showing suspected bomb locations. Millions of casualties, entire city blocks contaminated for decades. And it's all possible because people like Crawford and Thornfield sold out their own country for money. The satellite phone in Morrison's bag rang, its tone cutting through the cabin's silence like a blade. She checked the caller ID and felt her blood freeze. It's Crawford. Rodriguez drew his weapon and moved to the window, scanning the tree line for signs of approaching vehicles. Don't answer it. But Morrison was already reaching for the phone. If Crawford was calling, it meant he knew she had accessed Hamilton's files, which meant they were already out of time. Morrison, she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Rebecca, thank God. Crawford's voice carried the perfect note of concern and relief. We have been trying to reach you all morning. There's been a development in the Torres case. New evidence that could finally give us the breakthrough we need. Morrison looked at Rodriguez, who was shaking his head violently. Crawford was trying to draw her in, to get her to a location where she could be eliminated quietly. What kind of evidence? Morrison asked. The kind that requires a face-to-face briefing. I'm at the Las Vegas field office right now, but I can meet you anywhere that's convenient. This is big, Rebecca. Career making big. Career ending, more likely, or life ending. Morrison closed her eyes and made a decision that would either save her life or end it. I will meet you at the field office in 3 hours, she said. But Jim, I'm bringing backup. This case has gotten too dangerous for solo operations. A pause that lasted just a fraction too long. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable. See you at 3. Morrison ended the call and looked at Rodriguez. He's going to try to kill me the moment I walk into that building. Then we don't go to the building. We go to the media. Morrison shook her head. The media won't believe this without corroborating evidence. And by the time they verify the documents, the dirty bombs could be activated. She gathered Hamilton's files and stuffed them back into the envelope. There's only one way to stop this, Miguel. We have to get to the bombs before Crawford realizes we are not coming to the meeting. That's suicide, Rebecca. If this resurrection protocol is real, if there really are Pakistani operatives with radiological weapons in 4 major cities, we can't handle that with just the 2 of us. Morrison stood and moved to the cabin's window, looking out at the peaceful forest that surrounded them. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled high above the treetops, and she thought about Hamilton and his final phone call, about the choice between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths. Miguel, what if we don't have to handle it ourselves? What if we just have to make sure the right people get the information? Rodriguez frowned. What are you thinking? Morrison pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she hadn't called in over a year. I'm thinking that sometimes the only way to fight a conspiracy is with a bigger conspiracy. October 15th, 2003, 2:17 p.m. CNN headquarters, Atlanta, Georgia. Investigative journalist Sandra Kellerman had built her career on stories that other reporters wouldn't touch. Government cover-ups, corporate malfeasance, and conspiracies that reached into the highest levels of power. When her secure phone rang with a call from an FBI agent she had worked with years earlier, she expected another routine tip about organized crime or political corruption. She did not expect to receive evidence of a nuclear conspiracy that threatened the security of the entire United States. "Rebecca, are you sure about this?" Kellerman asked, reviewing the documents that had been transmitted to her secure server. "These allegations, if they are true, we are talking about treason at the highest levels of government." Morrison's voice came through the encrypted connection with crystalline clarity. "Sandra, I need you to understand something. In approximately 45 minutes, I'm going to walk into a trap that will probably get me killed. If I don't make contact with you by 6 p.m. Pacific time, you need to release everything, the documents, the recordings, all of it." "What trap?" "Rebecca, if you are in danger, the danger isn't just to me. According to the intelligence I have uncovered, there are dirty bombs made from stolen American uranium positioned in New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and Chicago. The people responsible are high-ranking federal officials who will kill anyone who threatens to expose them." Kellerman felt her world tilt on its axis. "You are talking about radiological terrorism on American soil. I'm talking about the consequences of a uranium smuggling operation that's been running for over a decade. 6 innocent truckers were murdered to protect this secret, Sandra. Probably more. And if we don't stop it now, millions of people are going to die when those bombs are activated." The line was quiet for several seconds as Kellerman processed the implications. "What do you need from me?" "Insurance," Morrison replied. "If something happens to me, if Agent Rodriguez and I don't survive what we are about to do, I need you to make sure the truth comes out. The families of those truckers deserve to know what really happened to their loved one, and the American people deserve to know that their own government has been selling weapons-grade uranium to terrorists." Kellerman was already typing, preparing the story that would either save American lives or destroy her career. "Rebecca, there has to be another way. Contact the Attorney General, the Secretary of Defense, someone with the authority to stop this. The conspiracy reaches too high, Sandra. We don't know who we can trust in Washington, but we know we can trust you." Morrison ended the call, leaving Kellerman alone with documents that read like a nightmare and a responsibility that felt like the weight of the world. October 15th, 2003. 3:00 p.m. FBI Field Office, Las Vegas, Nevada. Morrison and Rodriguez approached the federal building with the careful precision of soldiers entering a combat zone. They had spent the previous hour coordinating with Kellerman, establishing dead man switches that would release the Blackbird documents if they failed to check in, and preparing for a confrontation that would determine whether justice finally came to those who had died in the Nevada desert. Crawford was waiting in Conference Room B, the same sterile space where Morrison had briefed him dozens of times about the Torres investigation. But now she saw the room through different eyes. The cameras that could be recording their conversation, the soundproofing that would muffle gunshots, the single exit that could easily be blocked. "Rebecca, Agent Rodriguez." Crawford smiled as they entered, but Morrison caught the slight tension around his eyes. "I'm glad you could make it. What I'm about to show you is going to change everything we thought we knew about the Torres case." Crawford activated a wall-mounted monitor that displayed what appeared to be recent surveillance footage from a Nevada desert location. The timestamp showed the current date, just hours earlier. "This morning, acting on intelligence from a classified source, we raided a compound near Beatty, Nevada. What we found there explains everything: the missing truckers, the uranium thefts, all of it." The footage showed federal agents searching what looked like a terrorist training camp, complete with weapons caches, communication equipment, and radiation detection devices. But Morrison noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the terrorists being arrested was clearly wearing a federal badge beneath his tactical vest. "Domestic terror cell," Crawford continued. "Pakistani nationals working with American sympathizers to steal nuclear material and target American cities. We have identified the location of 4 radiological devices they were planning to detonate simultaneously. Rodriguez leaned forward. Where are the devices? Crawford's smile widened slightly. That's classified above your pay grade, Agent Rodriguez, but I can tell you that the threat has been neutralized. Morrison felt the trap closing around them. Crawford was telling them just enough truth to make his story believable, while burying the real conspiracy beneath layers of misdirection. The terrorists were probably legitimate federal agents who had discovered the truth about Blackbird, and their arrest was actually their elimination. What about the truckers? Morrison asked carefully. How does this explain Johnny Torres and the others? Wrong place, wrong time, Crawford replied. They stumbled onto the terrorist operation and had to be silenced. Unfortunate casualties in a much larger threat to national security. Morrison exchanged a glance with Rodriguez. It was time to play their final card. That's interesting, Jim, she said, pulling out a copy of the memorandum Hamilton had left in the safety deposit box. Because according to this document, which bears your signature, you personally authorized the elimination of Garrett McManus and ordered my reassignment to prevent me from discovering the truth about Blackbird. Crawford's expression didn't change, but Morrison saw his right hand move slightly closer to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. I'm not sure what you think you have found, Rebecca. Project Blackbird, Rodriguez interrupted, his own weapon now drawn and aimed at Crawford's center mass. Uranium smuggling operation run by the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and certain elements within the FBI. 17 people murdered to protect the secret, including 6 innocent truck drivers who were just trying to make a living. Crawford's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You have no idea what you are interfering with. The sale of surplus nuclear material to allied nations is a vital component of American foreign policy. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Allied nations? Morrison's voice rose. You sold weapons-grade uranium to Pakistan and Iran. You enabled the construction of dirty bombs that are currently deployed in American cities. Deployed and ready to be activated if certain inconvenient investigations aren't discontinued. Crawford replied, his hand now resting openly on his weapon. You see, Rebecca, the beauty of the Resurrection Protocol is that it gives us leverage. Pakistan knows that any military action against their nuclear program will result in the detonation of radiological devices in 4 American cities. It's the perfect deterrent. The truth hit Morrison like a physical blow. The dirty bombs weren't weapons of terrorism. They were instruments of policy, designed to prevent American military action against Pakistan's expanding nuclear program. Crawford and his co-conspirators hadn't just stolen uranium. They had enabled nuclear blackmail against their own country. You are insane, Rodriguez said. Crawford smiled. I'm pragmatic, and unfortunately for both of you, your investigation ends here. The conference room door burst open as Crawford reached for his weapon, and a team of armed federal agents flooded into the room. But instead of supporting Crawford, they aimed their weapons at him. FBI Associate Deputy Director James Crawford, the lead agent, announced, "You are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violations of the Atomic Energy Act." Crawford's face went white as he realized his support network had collapsed. This is impossible. You don't have the authority. Actually, we do. Morrison recognized the voice of FBI Director Robert Kane as he entered the conference room. Agent Morrison's evidence was quite compelling. Compelling enough to justify emergency presidential authorization for this operation. Morrison felt her knees go weak with relief. Director Kane, the dirty bomb, are being secured as we speak by joint FBI-DoD teams in all 4 target cities. We have also arrested Deputy Director Thornfield and Assistant Secretary Vance, along with a dozen other conspirators identified in Hamilton's files. Kane approached Morrison with an expression of grim respect. Agent Morrison, your investigation has uncovered one of the most serious breaches of national security in American history. The President has authorized me to inform you that you will be receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom for your service. But Morrison wasn't thinking about awards or recognition. She was thinking about Johnny Torres and Garrett McManus and the 4 other truckers whose families had spent years wondering what had happened to their loved ones in the Nevada desert. "Director Kane," she said quietly, "what about the families? The people who died because they stumbled onto this conspiracy?" Kane's expression softened slightly. "Full disclosure, Agent Morrison. The families will receive the complete truth about what happened to their loved ones, along with substantial financial compensation. And the men who died will be honored as American heroes who gave their lives protecting national security." Morrison nodded, feeling a weight she had carried for 6 years, finally beginning to lift. Justice was a poor substitute for the lives that had been lost, but it was better than the lies and cover-ups that had defined the Blackbird conspiracy. October 15, 2004. 1 year later, Johnny Torres Memorial Park, Beatty, Nevada. The memorial service was small, attended only by family members and a handful of federal agents who had worked to uncover the truth about the vanishing truckers. 6 granite markers stood in a semicircle beneath the Nevada sun, each bearing the name of a driver who had died protecting secrets they didn't even know they carried. Morrison stood before Johnny Torres's marker, reading the inscription that told only part of his story. Beloved husband and father, American hero, lost but not forgotten. Linda McManus approached, carrying flowers that she placed at her husband's memorial. At 68, she looked older than her years, worn down by a decade of uncertainty and grief. But there was peace in her eyes now, the peace that came from finally knowing the truth. "Agent Morrison," Linda said softly, "I wanted to thank you again, for never giving up, for making sure Garrett's death meant something." Morrison shook her head. "Your husband was a hero, Mrs. McManus. He died because he refused to participate in something he knew was wrong. That takes more courage than most people will ever understand." Emma McManus, now a successful pediatric surgeon, stepped forward and embraced Morrison. "Agent Morrison, because of what you did, my children will grow up knowing their grandfather died serving his country. That means everything to our family." As the service concluded and the families began to leave, Morrison found herself alone among the memorials. The Nevada wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the scent of desert flowers and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the rumble of trucks on the interstate, drivers hauling legitimate cargo along legitimate routes, unaware of the conspiracy that had once threatened to corrupt the very highways they traveled. Rodriguez approached from the parking area, carrying a folder that Morrison recognized as an active case file. "New assignment?" she asked. "Congressional testimony," Rodriguez replied. "They want us to brief the House Intelligence Committee about the Blackbird investigation. Make sure something like this never happens again." Morrison nodded, taking one last look at the memorial markers. "Miguel, do you think it was worth it? All the lives lost, all the damage done, just to uncover the truth?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. Rebecca's 6 good men died because they stumbled onto a conspiracy. 17 people total were murdered to protect a secret that threatened American national security. If we hadn't stopped it, how many more would have died when those dirty bombs were activated? Morrison didn't answer immediately. In the distance, a hawk circled high above the desert floor, riding the thermals in patterns that reminded her of surveillance and overwatch and all the times she had wondered if she was being watched. But today, for the first time in years, she felt truly free. "The truth has a way of surfacing," she said finally. "No matter how deep you bury it, no matter how many classification stamps you put on it, people like Johnny Torres and Garrett McManus, they represent something that can't be destroyed by bullets or bribes or bureaucracy." "What's that?" Morrison walked toward the parking area, leaving the memorial park and its granite guardians to stand watch over the Nevada desert. "Ordinary courage. The kind of bravery that comes from doing the right thing even when you don't understand the consequences." As they drove away, Morrison thought about the families who could finally grieve properly, about the conspirators who would spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, and about the nuclear materials that were once again secure under proper government oversight. The Blackbird conspiracy was over, its secrets exposed to the light of day. But she also thought about Hamilton's warning that the truth was like nuclear material. It had a half-life, and eventually, inevitably, it would decay into something that could no longer be contained. Somewhere in the bureaucratic depths of Washington, new conspiracies were probably already taking root. New secrets that would require new heroes to expose them. New ordinary people who would have to choose between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths. Morrison checked her phone and saw a text message from Sandra Kellerman. New story developing. Government contractors smuggling weapons to Central America. Interested? Morrison smiled and typed back, "Send me everything you have." In the Nevada desert, where secrets went to die and truth was buried beneath sand and classification stamps, the memorial markers stood guard over the memory of 6 truckers who had driven into the darkness and never returned. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. The truth about the vanishing truckers had finally come home. October 15, 2000. The documentary aired on the anniversary of Garrett McManus's death, a 2-hour investigation into the Blackbird conspiracy that had been 7 years in the making. The Vanishing Truckers, America's Nuclear Secret, won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked congressional hearings that led to sweeping reforms in nuclear security oversight. In a small house in Sparks, Nevada, Linda McManus watched the documentary with her granddaughter, Emma's youngest child, who bore Garrett's eyes and his stubborn determination to do the right thing regardless of the cost. "Grandpa was a hero," the little girl said as the credits rolled. Linda smiled and pulled her granddaughter closer. "Yes, sweetheart, Grandpa was a hero. And because people like Agent Morrison never stopped looking for the truth, everyone knows it now." Outside, the Nevada wind carried the sound of trucks on the interstate, drivers hauling cargo across the American highway system, unaware that their freedom to travel those roads had been preserved by men like Johnny Torres and Garrett McManus, who had given their lives to protect secrets they didn't even know they carried. In the end, that was what heroes looked like, not the polished marble of monuments or the bronze of statues, but ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things when the moment demanded it. The vanishing truckers had finally come home.